Hello everyone, I'm Sophie and I'm currently at Kechara Forest Retreat, Bentong, Malaysia. And this is the book that I'll be sharing from, Tales My Lama Told Me. This is by Pastor David Lai, sharing the stories within from our Guru, His Eminence, the 25th Sam Tuku Rinpoche. Today I'll be reading from chapter 8, Practice of Patience. And as usual, a picture to share with you. And this is Atisha on the top. Chapter 8, Practice of Patience, page 65. When I first heard this story from Rinpoche, I was flabbergasted. I was amazed that anyone would put himself in such a difficult situation as detailed in this story. I know for sure that I certainly would not be able to do it. I suppose this is why Atisha became a Buddha and continues to benefit an untold number of beings while I am here still wallowing in my self-made problems and karma. I realize now that how people react towards me is a reflection of my demeanor and actions. I can continue to fool everyone, but I cannot fool myself or my karma. It is not easy and it takes quite a bit of courage and determination to make a difference. That is why the great master Atisha exerted so much effort to practice patience, as you will see here. The great Indian master Atisha was invited by an ancient king to teach the Dharma in Tibet. He arrived at a crucial time when monasticism was in grave danger of disappearing from the land, and it fell upon him to revive the Dharma teachings there. His spiritual heir, the Tibetan disciple Drom Tongpa, eventually established the Kadam tradition that later evolved into the Gelug school, the largest in Tibet. Atisha started many practices in Tibet, but the most influential were his innovative teachings on training the mind. These mind training teachings are a systemized method for generating a mind of great compassion and wisdom. Atisha's mind training teachings, in particular, were later incorporated into the other three major schools of Buddhism in Tibet. At the famous Nalanda monastery in India, where he resided before he went to Tibet, the noble Atisha was well known, loved, and respected for being such a compassionate teacher. There was, however, an older monk there who actually hated him. This monk only saw negative traits in Atisha and always found opportunities to criticize him on whatever he did. When Atisha gave teachings, the monk would not attend them just to show his contempt. When he gave teachings himself, he would try to influence others not to go to Atisha's teachings. In short, he did his best to make Atisha's life in the monastery as miserable as possible by criticizing him and influencing others against him. If it were me, I would have dropped a H-bomb on that monk immediately. But because Atisha practiced the Dharma teaching so well, he reacted very differently. When in a sacred vision, the great female Buddha Tara advised Atisha to go to Tibet to teach the Dharma, Atisha invited this very same monk to go along with him to Tibet. He even sponsored his whole trip. This was not because Atisha was a fruitcake. It was because he wanted to practice love and patience. And he felt that this particular monk was the best person to help him achieve this. Aside from this monk, there was no one else in his whole monastery with whom he could practice patience, because they all loved and respected him so much. There really wasn't anyone else who didn't love him. All he ever heard from everyone was praise. There was only that one monk who hated him and constantly sought to defame him all the time. Atisha figured that this was a golden opportunity. He asked the monk, Why don't you come along with me to Tibet? So they went to Tibet together. Atisha was there for 13 years with this monk, and the monk continued to criticize Atisha until the day he died. However, Atisha remained very patient with him and even performed a wonderful funeral for this monk so that he could take a good rebirth. In Tibet, they cut up the corpse, mix it with flour, and feed it to the birds as the last act of merit for the deceased, to give something back to the earth. If it were me, I would have covered up the corpse and not feed it to the birds at all, or I would have just thrown him off the cliff. Can you imagine that Atisha invited this ridiculous old monk to be with him for all those years? And all this monk did was to criticize him the whole time. It took Atisha probably over a year to travel from India to Tibet. It is not like today where we can just hop onto a plane and fly over. Back then, they would have had to walk across northern India to Nepal, then cross the Himalayan range and down to central Tibet. It would have been a treacherous crossing and extremely cold, especially up in the mountains. At the time, there were also many warring factions on their desolate land, making it a very dangerous journey. They would have had to sleep outside in tents, so it would not have been comfortable, and they would not have been able to shower for months. And yet, Atisha invited this old monk with him and sponsored his whole trip. Atisha secured the sponsors to pay for his passage, gave him money and supplies, made new robes for him, and even served the monk himself all the way to Tibet. Atisha did all that for this monk, and all the monk did in return was to criticize him from beginning to end. Even as Atisha gave teachings, this monk caused a lot of trouble. He never accepted Atisha as a good teacher, despite all that Atisha did for him and others. This monk clearly meditated for the benefit of every single being on this planet except for Atisha. Atisha is as famous as Buddha Shakyamuni in Tibet. In fact, many lineages and teachings we have today have been made available to us through the kindness of Atisha. Even the Tara practice that we have is due to his kindness. Atisha taught us how to make offerings and the importance of making offerings in order to collect merit to support our spiritual practice. Today, wealth vases are highly sought after. The first person to teach us how to make a wealth vase and to continue and invoke wealth energy was Atisha. Among the many numerous texts he authored in his lifetime, his most famous work was the original Lamrim, or Stages of the Path to Enlightenment, a central text outlining all the steps to enlightenment that became the cornerstone of Buddhist practice in Tibet. He was also the one to disseminate monk vows in Tibet, which then spread all over Tibet and Mongolia. He was a pure monk and was thus highly sought after to ordain many new monks. This great Lama served and compassionately took care of the old monk, who had nothing but the ugliest of things to say about him until the last days of his life. Even when he died, Atisha took care of his funeral arrangements and personally prayed for his good rebirth. When we look at ourselves, many of us would never do that. Some of you might even think that Atisha was crazy for doing what he did. But when we look deeper, Atisha was not crazy. He just saw a golden opportunity to practice patience, love, and compassion because there was literally no one else around who hated him or made his life difficult. He found only one person and he said to himself, "This is my grand opportunity. I have to make sure that I destroy the last traces of my negative afflictions so I can become a Buddha to benefit others." That was his motive for taking this monk along with him to Tibet. By Atisha's example, we should begin to cultivate the thought, when I meet others who are oppressed by violent and intense sufferings, or by their negative emotions, may I treasure them as if I have found a precious treasure. That is the reason why Atisha did all this for that monk. It was because an enemy is a precious treasure. They offer you the opportunity to develop the qualities that you need to become a Buddha. Therefore, when you go to a Dharma center, to a store or any other place, and you meet unpleasant salespeople, waiters, relatives, friends, or even Dharma brothers and sisters, you should jump on them, hug them, love them, kiss them, give them gifts, and prostrate to them if you want to be a Buddha. You may think this is ridiculous, but I am not telling you to do these things literally. You should hold this kind of motivation within your mind and think, oh my goodness, what a great opportunity to practice the Dharma. Jump on those that disturb you. Hold their hands and don't let them go. They may think that you are crazy, but who cares what they think about you? You will be a Buddha by practicing in this way. This was what the greatest Buddhist masters, such as Atisha, did throughout their lives. You should think about what that means. And while reading this, something just came onto my mind because it just happened recently. And, as they say, it could come from anywhere, this annoyance. So it is a good opportunity to practice, because sometimes when you think, because someone said something nasty, and, it was directed at me. So, I, of course, in my mind, I would think of all things to reply if I did. And but in the end of it, what's the point? What's the point of actually aggravating the situation? So I just let it go. I, well, I would say that it does help to actually think in every situation that you face, whenever you meet something that's nasty or whatever, it's really not worth the effort to create the karma, just to get back at that other person. So think before you react. That's the advice. So thank you. And this was an interesting story of Atisha, who held on to the one person who always speak bad about him and does things to make Atisha look bad. Because Atisha was just loved by everyone, and as such, Atisha didn't have the chance to practice patience or compassion or kindness. So he did that with that one person, who actually was nasty to him. So anyway, thank you for sharing your time with me, and please do join me as I share another story in my next session. And we'll end this with a completion dedication in Tibetan. Changjo Sencho Rinpoche, Make Panam Geyushi, Ke Panam Pame Payang, Goni Gondu Pewasho, Tony Toa Rinpoche, Make Panam Geyushi, Ke Panam Pame Payang, Goni Gondu Pewasho, Naso Jini Sapagi Wadi, Tadandroa Kuna Gampada, Jepa Jesu no Santrapai, Tamping Imporin to Sa Sesho, Kewa Kuntu Yandala Madan, Dromicho Kipala Lochoche, Sadam Nangi Yoterazoni, Doji Changing of Pagatus, Kewa Di, Yoduda, Lama Sangyo Droyon, Drewa Chaki. Sorry, Drewa Chikia Malupa, De Isala Gopashu, Choki Gaposungapa, Chosunampa Pewala, Geki Samasi Wadang, Tunki Malu Sawasho, Dadam Sangi Dusundan, Drewe Songi Latene, Gewa Losantrapai, Tampayo Riva, Gyushi, ni modele sendele ni mi gunyan dele shi ni sentatu dele pel concho songi jingilo concho songi ngotuso concho songi trasi sho jesu lama kuserap tingchi nam ka trini chocho ke padang lo samtem pedro mi sap songi dro e mun satato ni gyu shi gang ri raw we ko we shin kam de pen nan dewa malu gyu we ne cheren se wan ten sing get so shape shi de badu de gyu shi hôm tôm bì ngô trù mà lù bà đến để đã là sau du số có đàn đến bà long chọn nam kế bà su shik shuk tin cell. Thank you again and do join me for my next sharing.